Okay, I've got another game here today to talk through. It's another commentated game of what I've been playing. I'm running an OSP fleet for this game. It's mostly a cargo feeder, plasma, and 100mm fleet that has a few other things attached to it that I'm playing around with. To be honest, the other things I've got going with it don't do a lot in this game, but it is all about the cargo fleet, which is kind of what I want to show off. And it's just another example of utilizing another area of the map that doesn't get used as much, maybe a little bit of an ambush attack. It's all about ambushing. It's great. So here we are at the deployment. I'm playing OSP, and I'm looking around, and I'm kind of thinking, let's just do what I did with my Reigns fleet last time. Let's go under the map again. It keeps you safe from those long-range rails, especially if you're up against ANS. They're going to hit you with a lot of railguns. I have some other ships here. The Lost in Space is a railgun cargo feeder I'm messing around with, so I put that somewhere I could support. The Spent Casing and the Admiral Dowd are mine layer and rocket tugboats that I'm playing with. And I'm kind of just thinking about where to put them. I decided to put the Spent Casing up over to the left there towards point D, hoping to maybe back cap it at some point in the game and just hover around that area. And I bring the Spent Casing along with, I bring the Admiral Dowd along with the rest of my fleet because I think the extra rockets could be good support. And if I can get it on A, then maybe I can deploy some mines there. So you can see here I've got my cargo feeders arranged in a 3-unit group with the addition of a shuttle. And the shuttle is really just there to act as a locking mechanism. It's got a pinpoint on it, and then it breaks off from the fleet as soon as there's a situation where it can take part and help out in. It's not really there for the long term. And in terms of the build here, the Audacity and the Rooster are just they're built with 2 of the quad 100mm cannons, and then they've also got a plasma cannon on their spinal mount. And then the Skylark has an R4 300 radar, just to try and give some better tracks to fire at. It's a little bit weak because the fleet itself hasn't got a pinpoint in it. That pinpoint is actually on the shuttle, which will eventually detach. But you can see here that it works fine enough in this game. So I'm just trying to keep some orders for the Spent Casing here, just so it can pop out, see what's there, and go back into hiding. And I've got the rest of the fleet coming in underneath. You'll notice I flipped the camera over just to give orders to Group 1 and then flip it back over again when dealing with everything else, just because it's a bit easier to read the terrain that way. The Lost in Space here, I don't really make great use of it this game. I'm probably going to dump it from the fleet. It's not really good enough to be on its own. The idea is that it can launch off a few mine containers, launch off a few decoys, but I actually think firing decoys from it this game actually gets it killed. Just while the game's starting out, having a look at my teammates' ships, we've got a couple of 450mm line ships here, which is nice to see. These things are definitely giving the ANS battleships a run for their money at the moment. Getting in slugging matches between the two of them, it's pretty interesting to see who wins. But I'm really enjoying the light ship game. You'll notice I also put the formation here on loose. I really like a loose formation in a group of ships like this. Just gives them the room they need to maneuver and turn independently. And I find it just gives them a higher top speed in general as well. I'm not using any flanking or anything at this stage in the game. I want to read the battlefield before I commit my engines. These ships cannot flank for as long as my Reigns can, so they're not going to be perma-flanking like they do. Picked up some enemy contacts quite far below D. I want to try and move the Lost in Space into position. My thoughts here were just maybe I can fire some railgun rounds off at them and maybe just ward them off the zone. Also maybe distract them with some decoys, which is a big part of my game plan. Everything else is just moving into position just now. I'm trying to keep an eye on what's happening in the whole battle. We do have an advantage in cap already, and that's always a really good thing to get in these games. Getting ahead in the cap game gives you the initiative, and it puts the onus into the enemy team's hands. They need to do something to catch up on cap, and we're already capping our second point. They have not capped started their second point yet, so we're gaining a little bit more on them. And if they're paying attention, they're going to realize they need to make some moves very quickly, and it pulls them out of position. My teammate's fleet here is already engaging track 1529, which is pretty impressive. The plasma cannons, they do have a pretty long range. He's not going to be able to do much more, but that's also told me where they are. So I'm thinking I can maybe bring my fleet up and underneath that track. Also see if I can get a better picture of it with the Spent Casing. There's a missile here. I want you to try and catch the name of it. I'm not sure what's going on with it, what it is. I don't know why this one missile has been fired down at this fleet, but it has a pretty interesting name. I'm guessing it's a torpedo, judging by the speed especially. But if you check it, I think I get a mouse over it in a second when it gets red. You can see here my teammates have launched some intercepted missiles, which is really nice. They've saved them with skin here. Although it takes 2 of them and doesn't die, which really hammers forth. It's called the, don't know if you caught that, it's called the Biggest Boy. But it gets killed by the second barrage of missiles there, so that's it down. Here I'm just getting ready with the Skylark and Co. Coming up, flip the map over. I can see that I'm getting pretty close to 1209. It's within plasma range at the moment. It's getting close to being within other range. I decide to pull the Admiral Dowd up away from the asteroid here to give me a better picture of what's tucked in over the top of the asteroid. What I don't want to do is come over with my fleet and find that there's like a Vauxhall or a Solomon just under the lip of the rock there that I run into. So bringing the Dowd up gives me more perspective down on the asteroid, less things can hide inside it. So that's the job that ship's doing just now. It also gives it line of sight on 1209, which means I could launch some missiles at it. Pre-queuing up some locking and E-War as well, getting the R-300 and the pinpoint on this ship when I'm ready to move. And then I decide to move the Dowd over. I'm pretty happy that there's nothing hiding from me there. Just checking what's going on with the rest of my fleet. The Austin Space hasn't got a shot. I decide to just maybe bring it back into safety here and get ready to fire off some more torpedoes. Sorry, not torpedoes, fire off some decoys. Not doing it just yet. Spent Casing has a good shot here on the track down there, but I don't really have much I can do from here. You can see that the Spent Casing has a mine layer, and it also has rockets. There's not much you can do, but I decided to move it towards D and just see what it can do there. The enemies still haven't capped their second point. We now got double the capture points that they don't have, and that's another really important thing to keep track of as the game goes on, is what's the cap point situation? Do I need to make a move to cap, or can I continue to put pressure on my opponents? 1209 here I don't think realizes I'm here, and it gives me a really good opportunity to ambush it. And as we all know, the OSP are the ambush faction. Now it has been taking a lot of fire from my ally here. They've done most of the work on this ship, but if I can get a good ambush off here, and I'm telling my opponent, my ally, that I'm going to do that, we can probably finish it off really, really quickly. Now there's another track here, 1529, I need to be aware of, but it's not really anything to worry about. It actually is closer than the other one, but we'll see what happens. And I'm just getting into position. A lot of positioning, as you know, Nebulous Fleet Command is all about attacking from the right location rather than just attacking. I've got a line of sight on 3975, so I decide to fire off some railgun rounds at it. I also decide to launch off a couple of decoys just to see what happens with them, but I actually think firing those decoys attracts too much attention, and you'll see that off screen the Lost in Space gets wrecked really, really quickly. We're getting into position now where I've almost got line of sight on 1209. In fact, the Dowd I think has that line of sight. I think I'm going to launch some missiles at it here, or maybe in a second. I'm going to put some in range with the Piranha rockets. Love the Piranha rockets, they're great. I really want to mess around with the shuttle fleet, but I haven't built it yet. You can see here that my other ships are getting line of sight on it. I'm just checking my moves, making sure they're all set to flank speed. And then I could actually probably queue up the plasma attacks now we're in range. And I might as well queue up everything else. I'm just telling my ships to move into position. And now at this point the enemy's probably noticing that I'm here. Spent Casing is under fire from something, probably a Vauxhall. I just tell it to move out of the way. It's fast enough. I will just put it onto flank and evade, and that should get it out of trouble without taking too much damage. Reacting to that quickly was a good thing to do. Keeping an eye out for those icons on the left-hand side of the screen when I'm locked and when I'm being fired at is a good thing. Obviously, I've got a little bit of a fire, but we do have a little bit of DC on these ships. I've now got line of sight on 1209. It's time to start firing the 100mm. It's already been opened up by a ton of plasma, so I don't really need to worry too much about pre-smoothing it down. I decided to fire off a bunch of missiles here from the Screamer. See what it can do. Just fire off the whole barrage. The ship looks pretty big, and I'd like to do that. I'm actually holding it here. What I'm doing is I've got the barrage ready, and I'm holding it, waiting to see if I get a good time to fire. Maybe it's fired off a bunch of missiles or something, or there's other shots coming in. The enemy is definitely running at this point. Want to make sure my ships are firing HE/HC, so I just tell them to do that, queue that up as well. I think you're going to see me detach the Screamer now, because I want to bring the Screamer in closer, and it's a lot faster than the rest of my ships. And it's coming in to intercept this ship. And that's when, if you were the owning 1209, you should change your vector at this point, because you can see that this shuttle is coming for you, and you know what that means, what's going to happen next. If you ever see a ship detached from an OSP detachment and just burn directly on an intercept course for your ship, you should know that it's coming in to drop some rockets on you. Just keeping an eye on the rest of my fleet right now. Lost of Space is coming back into getting some shots on 3975. It's out of range, unfortunately, at the moment. I didn't catch that at the time. You can see here now, 1209 is just taking an absolute beating from our 100mm, and at this point I now start launching the missiles. I do have a problem in this game where I accidentally click Shift and Control instead of Alt-Shift when I'm queuing up commands, which is why if you notice that sometimes I just accidentally leave the missile launch window, it's because I've done that. And I probably overcommit with missiles here, because I also fire off a full barrage from the Screamer. And I think I figured the Screamer was actually a... Sorry, that 1209 was probably going to be an Axford or a Solomon. It turns out it's not. It turns out it's a Vauxhall after I've unleashed on it, but I don't think it's too bad a trade, honestly. It's taking an absolute humping here from the 100mm and the plasma, which is what I really like about this fleet. The DPS that it has, the burst damage is not high, but the sustained damage of once that plasma degrades the armor is pretty extreme. You can see here that I've now realized that this is a Vauxhall. But it's probably going to die if this barrage gets through, which it does because there's no PD active on the ship anymore. And I can see there that its engines are offline, so I actually realize at this point that this thing is dead, and I need to stop shooting at it. Definitely overcommitted a little bit on the fire there, but I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that as long as you're confirming a kill. My new target now is 1529, so I'm telling the fleet to turn around, I'm telling the fleet to cease fire, and I'm going to reposition now to move on to the capture point here, which is A, and push 1529 off it. And I think that was a really nice ambush. We definitely caught that Vauxhall surprised. It was quite happy to fire at the other fleet that was shooting at it, my allies' fleet at long range, but as soon as my fleet got into range and started pounding it, it ran away. That's my teammate reminding me that 1209 is dead. I'm telling them, yep, I know that, that's so cool. But it can be hard to see that I have stopped shooting at them. Alright, just checking on my other ships right now. You'll see that Lost in Space is still okay right now. That will change very, very shortly. Screamer's coming up and over. Lost in Space is just sitting here. I want it to shoot at 1529, which is another Vauxhall. It is now in range, which is good. And the rest of the fleet is coming up and over. And this is what I quite like to do with my games. I like to ambush somebody underneath A, and then come up to A, cap it, and then move to position to actually support my team from there. Which I think makes me quite useful, or puts me in a good position, because I'm not just setting straight for a frontal confrontation with the enemy, and I try not to play too much to the ANS's game plan, which is to fight, you know, straight on with a brawl. I want to try and attack them from behind, attack them from below, come at them from an angle they're not ready for. There's a Vauxhall going up, I think. That was the Vauxhall we just fought. Spent casing is just tucked into the rock there. I'm going to leave it there as like a special case in my pocket for later. But 1529 is coming off point A. We can now get onto point A with the Screamer, which is great use of that shuttle. It's already emptied its missiles, so it can do something else, and capping that point is a great job for it. And I'm bringing the rest of the fleet up to a position where they can actually mess around with point D, which is usually a strong point for the allied team, the ANS team. And my plan is to come up behind D and engage whatever they have there from the rear, while they're distracted by the line ships that are attacking them from the front. And getting an enemy in a pincer attack like that is pretty deadly in this game. I'm just a bit worried about the Lost in Space taking fire here, so I get it to back up while firing. We actually get a railgun round off here, so it is actually doing something. This poor Vauxhall is right out in the open, taking a lot of fire. You'll see that my ships here are firing at those missiles with grape shot rounds, which is what they'll do automatically whenever they haven't been given a firing order. And you can force that behavior by just giving them a ceasefire command in the middle of a firefight, and they will instantly reload their guns to fire grape shot and fire at incoming missiles if you give that command, which is something I rely on quite a lot with this fleet. 1529 here is not having a great day. The Admiral Dowd is in position, just kind of chilling out over here as well, so I get it moving over to just... My plan here is actually really dumb. I'm like, there's not really much else that this ship has left for it. It has 7 missiles, so we're going to fire those. And I'm thinking, what other weapons does it have? Well, it has a 100mm cannon on the front, which doesn't do a lot. It also has mines, so I figure why not just lay some mines right next to this Vauxhall and see what happens. I don't expect them to do anything, but that's what I got to do. It's more of just being a bit rude, really, that I think I can get away with it. But that's what I go for here. You'll see that I am now capping A as well. So we've got a huge advantage on cap points. This is a big turning point in the battle, where from this point onwards, unless the ANS players do something quite extreme, they're not going to be able to catch up on cap points, because they're not making moves right now to capture any points, and we're starting to pressure them on the points they already hold, which is not a good situation for them to be in. The fact that I managed to cap A with a shuttle, pretty much uncontested, is a bad sign for the ANS team in terms of coordinating defense of these points. There are missiles inbound, but they're not inbound on the Screamer. They're actually firing at this fleet down here, which is just moving as a big blob, which is fine. It's a very strong position of power, but it means that, you know, there's nothing really stopping me from getting the cap. So I get in really close here. I tell my ship to shoot 100mm at the 1529. Why not? And then I decide to drop the mines. At this point, the Lost in Space is still okay. It's just firing off railgun rounds. You'll see that this ship still has, unfortunately, its anti-missile defenses, so it is able to destroy all of the mines as soon as they come out the ship, but I thought it was funny to just try and lay the mines on it. I'm a much bigger fan of mine containers these days than actual mine layers. It's quite hard to get a mine layer to do what you want it to do. At least you can fire a mine container from somewhere a little bit safer. I think good mine layer play is going to be really, really strong, not one of my strengths at the moment, unfortunately. here I am just preparing to attack the ship when I get up above here. One of my plans is I'm going to use hold fire to try and... Oh, do I have an alarm going off while I'm recording? That would be embarrassing. No, just a phone number. Great. Ignore that. Sorry about that. Should have my phone turned off. Anyway, we're coming up from below, and then all of a sudden, the Lost in Space is about to explode. I don't know what happened to it. I was kind of not super paying attention. I'm trying to think here, do we repair the Lost in Space? But the... pretty much everything is destroyed here. And I just give an abandoned ship order. Probably get that a little bit early. We probably could have saved the ship, but I was a bit too focused on this ambush coming up now, and I decided to go for that instead. So you can see I'm coming up from below D. They will detect me very, very shortly and make tracks to get out of here, but they're trying to hold D with one Vauxhall at the moment. So I'm queuing up my attacks. I've got my weapon commands on hold, so nobody's going to fire until we've got a straight solution, but everyone's going to pre-align to the enemy, which means that when I do unleash, that it's going to be quite a devastating bombardment. The Dowd here is just retreating out of fire as well. These tugs hold on really well in this fight. They're actually really, really useful, and I'm really happy with what they get done. Even just acting as distractions, they do a great bit of work. So here comes my main fleet. I realize that the Vauxhall's getting off the point. It's realized that I'm coming and it's running, so I just open up with everything I've got. I think I do it in a second. I don't think I've got line of sight yet, but I actually do. I take off weapon control, put it onto tight, which means everyone can unleash fire, and you'll see they all start firing pretty much instantly. And this is a really nice, just punishing amount of fire that this ship is suddenly taking from behind, where it doesn't have the best armor. Obviously, 100mm HEHC is never going to penetrate armor particularly well, but even just a couple of bombardments from plasma will open that up, and most of these ships have been softened by my teammates throughout the game anyway. So yeah, this is another really nice ambush, I think, in this game. Coming up behind the enemy, they weren't expecting me to come from this direction because this is actually where they spawned from. Cargo feeders do have the capability to get around pretty well. I'm having to use flank speed a lot here to try and keep up with that to get my almost 30 meters per second movement speed, but it is putting me into some great positions. You can see here I'm just firing plasma into its engines and hitting those engines with HEHC 100mm, which is, you'll see, kills this ship really, really quickly. In fact, I think it may have just died. It was firing its engines. Its engines have just gone offline. I take a look at it in a second, and I think I check here, and it's dead. No lights, no gas venting. It's mission killed. So I just mark it as killed for my team. Give my ships a ceasefire order in a second, and then we move on to capture D. And that's two really, really good ambushes, I think. 2 Vauxhalls taken out from angles they weren't expecting. And also, singular Vauxhalls are not going to do great against the OSP, so catch them on their own is really nice as well. So I've captured A, and now moving into capture D, which means I think I've done quite a lot to help my team out here. The enemy are trying... We're also capping D off them as well. I can actually hit 3975 from here as well. This is a Solomon, which you don't see a lot. They're pretty hard to use effectively against the OSP, but they do have a lot of staying power. You see here that this ship is just completely clearing out that incoming missile barrage. But I realize I've still got a tug that has rockets, so we're going to bring that into play here. And I'm also just opening fire on this ship with my cargo feeders while they move into capture D. The more fire we can pour onto this Solomon, the more work the damage control teams are going to have to do. And the more work the damage control teams are going to have to do is the slower it's going to be for it to recover from ships being destroyed. Generally, when you see a Solomon, you're going to expect it to survive pretty well. It's going to be incredibly strong. It's going to probably be a zombie battleship. That's the general build. This thing's got 450mm cannons, as you can see it firing, and I've got D almost completely capped here. I decided to just get a bit cinematic. You can see the amount of fire that my ships are able to put out is pretty extreme. Obviously, got to countenance the fact that it is only 100mm ordnance, but the rate of fire is high, and once you get through the armor with the plasma, then you are doing quite a lot of internal damage. Just going to start pushing my fleet towards the target. I'm pre-firing a little bit too early here because I haven't got a lot of plasma on the flank yet, but I have ammo to spare, and I'm quite happy with my ships aligning as they're firing. There goes the Vauxhall I killed before. Luckily, my ships are out of range, so not taking too much damage from that explosion. I'm getting close here. This is where I mess up my targeting a little bit. I right-click and then left-click by accident. Just checking what that is there. So I just queue up again, and then I'm hitting control here instead of holding shift, which is a little bit frustrating. It's just an accident. I think in my head I always want to hold control instead of shift, but I fix it in a second. You'll see here I get off the rest of the barrage with no problems. Yeah, there we go. I just took a second to think about it before I fired, and now at almost point blank range, I'm launching my piranhas. I think a couple of them get through, which is pretty nice. I should have maybe waited until there's a missile barrage coming in from my teammates, but if nothing else, I think we get 2 or 3 through. which will do quite a lot of damage to the ship's hull. We're coming in again. We've got a really great coordinated attack happening here as well, with my teammate attacking them from the front, and my monitors are able to engage this battleship without taking any fire at all. One of our opponents throws in the towel at this point. The points are very much on our side, and that Solomon unfortunately is too slow to really compete with a capping game. It's great for defending a point, but where it is located on this battlefield, this is actually just between points, not able to do much to help out. And now the plasma is striking the side of this, we can start to erode that armor, and our 100mm ammo can start to get inside and chew it up from the... I got a little bit too into there, but to basically just chew it up, do a lot of damage. And also, this is helping my teammates out as well, because I think some of them have started to fire HE at it rather than AP. Just remembering to take my ships off of flank speed so they're not completely destroying their engines. And just getting some nice shots of this very under pressure Solomon as it retreats out, and my ships in the background just firing everything they've got at it. One thing my cargo monitor fleet has that maybe might be a detriment is it only has 2 plasma cannons. It could maybe do with swapping the Skylark out to having a plasma cannon rather than the R4300, and putting the R4300 on a tug, which can mount it. But I'm pretty happy with how it is at the moment. It performs very well in this game. You can see my tug there. I think that's the Admiral Dow just power sliding. No, it's a spent casing doing a power slide around the Solomon. Again, I go for the cheeky mine drop at the second, I think. The enemy, something has just locked one of my ships. I think it's a spent casing, yeah. I think it gets locked. And then I've got incoming missiles. I decided to drop the mines, and then I think I noticed at this point there's incoming missiles on the spent casing, so I move it. And unfortunately, the Solomon still has PD, so it shoots the mines down as well. Yeah, here comes the incoming missiles. But you can see the spent casing is actually able to deal with them pretty nicely. One thing I just want to do is get some lateral movement to the target going, so that I'm not an easy hit for it. But we managed to shoot down that entire missile barrage, which is pretty good for a tug. I was impressed with that. I wasn't expecting it to do that. We're still pouring fire onto the Solomon. It's still fighting though, which is a good build. But telling my teammate, don't worry about holding back if you're worried about hitting the spent casing. It's empty. It's done its job. And then I noticed fire coming down on the Skylark from above. And this is actually great for me because the Skylark is the non-fight ship. I just give a turn order to my team. I don't automatically tell them to turn around, because if I do that, they'll just stop in space and decelerate. So I'm going to give them a turning order so they come around in a sweep to avoid this fire. I also set them to evade just to try and deal with that. We've got missiles coming down. When I notice that there's missiles being fired, I tell my ships to cease fire. That will stop them loading 100mm HEHC and switch to grape shot, just in case there's going to be a massive missile barrage coming down on them. I didn't want them to be in a situation where they weren't preparing to fire at the enemy. This guy's firing, I think it's 450mm, I think that's HE he's firing rather than armor piercing, but even still it's actually slightly over piercing on the cargo monitor. I now just start firing 100mm back at him. It's probably not going to do a lot of damage. He's got 2 railguns on this ship as well. This is an Axford, not a Solomon. But once we get plasma turned onto them, we should be able to do quite a lot of damage. It's very much just the closing steps of the battle now. The enemy have brawled with us here over this point rather than trying to cap. And that's put them in a position that's very, very difficult to come back from at this point. We are really far ahead in terms of control points, really far ahead in terms of actual points themselves, and there's not a lot they can do. I was just flagging that target to my team to make sure they were aware of it. The railguns will, of course, debuff my ship, which is a bit of a problem. But what I'm going to try and do is close with them while we're moving, hopefully avoid a few shots if we can. We'll get our lateral movement speed up soon. But actually that last 450mm barrage didn't hit, which is great. But the movement we were doing as well is causing a lot of our plasma rounds to not hit as well. Those 2 there did though, which is really nice to see. So we've got 2 rails and a triple-barreled 450mm turret on this ship, which is quite a nasty combination. The rails work quite well against the OSP, and then the 450mm can help finish off later in the game. You might want to look at putting the triple-barreled 250mm on there to deal with tugs and shuttles. What I'm doing here is I'm just going through all my ships and checking damage control, see if there's anything I need to restore, anything that needs to be addressed, but there's nothing that crazy going on. The Skylark has a lot of damage on it. I think that was the Axford Solomon going up there. So that's another ANS capital ship destroyed. How much damage control is too much on a BB? I don't think there is such a thing as too much damage control on a battleship these days. And you can see here that we're just now bullying this this Axford with our 100mm and our plasma. It's a really nice combination. I really recommend giving it a try. It's a lot of fun, and it makes you feel like you could attack anything, which is sometimes a frustration I have with the game. If I've got a lighter ship and I come across something like an Axford or Solomon, I feel like there's just nothing I can do about it. But with the 100mm and the plasma, I always feel like I've got an option. We're getting very close to the end of the game now. There's not really many players left in it. You can see just how much fire these cargo monitors can pump out. It's really impressive. I really love to watch them fight. The quad barrel 1mm turrets are just really fun. And that's it. That's the game over there. The enemy surrender. I'm pretty sure that Axford might be mission killed, or at least very badly damaged from the fire we've poured onto it. What we'll do now is we'll just really quickly take a look at the battle report, because I wanted to check what I'd done here and see if I'd been that useful to my team or not. So I scroll down, check a look at the Admiral Dowd. It managed to do 2,000 damage to targets. Did quite a lot of damage with its 100mm AP, and it managed to hit with 5 of its Piranha rockets for 1,778 damage. That's pretty impressive. Didn't hit with any of its mines, but that's okay. Next up, we'll have a look at the Audacity. The Audacity did 5,329 damage. 4,400 of that was with its HEHC, and 900 of that was with Plasma. The Lost in Space didn't do that much. It did 1,300 damage. Most of that was with railguns. I've jumped onto the Rooster here. Rooster did almost 5,000 damage with HEHC as well, 900 damage with his Plasma. We got 14 hits with the rockets from the Screamer there, doing 6,000 damage, which is great. Skylark managed to do 4,000 damage with its HEHC as well. So all of my ships coming in at about 5,000 damage, my primary ships, which I'm pretty happy with. We've got 2 missile hits on the spent casing and no hits with the mines on the mine layer. And that's something I need to work on, get that mine layer game a little bit better. But that's another game that I just played through on the weekend that I thought people might like to see. Again, talking about what I've been thinking about, what my plans are, and just how I've pushed that game onwards. I hope you found this interesting. I can do some run-throughs of both of the fleets I featured if people want to see it. I've had a few people asking about it. For those of you who are interested in High Fleet, the Varyag vote is about to drop, and that's the last vote we're looking for. So that's exciting times. Until the next video, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll catch you later. Ciao.